Namaskar and welcome to this exciting episode of Sattology Debunking Mythology. Sat means truth, Logos means a study or science, Sattology means a science of truth or study of truth. Opposite of that is mythology, which means a science of fake lie imagination or study of fake lie imagination. It is always our endeavor to tell the right version of the story from the point of view of natives. And we all know that the global history is written by the colonizers. They have written, they're telling us in the universities, if you go to American university and learn about India, you will actually probably come back with an image that they are snake charmers and you are probably superior. But when it comes to work and business, then you have shocked. Then sometimes they are smarter than you. It's because the colonial education makes you feel that kind of artificial superiority in every possible way. So so today's show is a very important one of the icons of Indian independence, that how he was misrepresented in the Western media. I'm talking about the British media, European media, and the American media and American textbooks. And so I have a very, very special person, Sri Chandrachur Ghose, who is joining
Namaskar.
us from Hyderabad, India. Welcome, Chandrachur.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So, Chandrachur, before we start off, this latest book you have written, The Untold Story of Subhash Chandra Bose, you've written. Now, what was the reason for writing this? What are the main reasons for writing this?
Well, there were two big reasons, or rather three big reasons for writing this book. And we have felt the need for a very long time. Along with a few friends, including Anujdhar, whom you know about, he has been in your show, we formed Mission Netaji in 2005 to investigate and get all documents declassified related to Netaji. And that was a long battle which continued from 2006 onwards and kind of reached a climax in 2015 when the Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, announced that he would declassify all files related to Netaji. We started with this limited objective of finding out what really happened to Netaji, and we it won't be an exaggerated claim that we have reached a conclusion which is scientifically valid. It stands on evidence that is circumstantial, that is scientific, that is forensic, and various other evidences. So we know exactly what happened, though there are a lot of gaps. But while this process of investigation went on, we felt the need for understanding two more things. One was we felt that the life of Subhash Chandra Bose and his work, his ideas, his vision for an independent India was grossly understated and misrepresented. It was twisted. We saw what has happened in independent India is that icons have been turned into symbols. And those symbols often gave a very partial, if they were not fully misrepresenting the icon concern. So when it came to Mahatma Gandhi, it was only truth and non-violence. As if truth and non-violence did not exist in India's ancient legacy culture. We didn't have it in our heritage and was invented by Mahatma Gandhi, but he became the icon, the symbol. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, our first independent India's first prime minister, became the icon, the symbol for democracy. And unfortunately, Subhash Bose was given two symbols. Inside India, he was turned into a symbol of a brave warrior and limited to that. And outside India, he became a symbol of Axis collaborator. And both these were not only inadequate but patently false. So we wanted to bring the truth out. And that process, the work started from there. That was the second reason. The third reason was, along with our research, we also saw that this entire you don't like mythology. Your show is to debunk mythology. So we also tried to debunk a mythology which has been imposed on Indians and the world for the last 75 years, that non-violence, and that too Gandhian non-violence, got India her freedom. So these three are very intertwined strands. So unless one truly understands Subhash Chandra Bose, one cannot really fathom the post 1945 mystery of his disappearance. And unless one understands the currents, the undercurrents that led to India's independence, one cannot understand correctly Subhash Bose's personality and his disappearance mystery, which is, by the way, we don't consider it to be a history, because it has repercussions in modern India as well. And that is why uh, so many files, hundreds of files on Subhash Bose were kept a secret till 2015. And even now, files held by the intelligence agencies are still kept a secret. For a person who is officially declared to be dead in 1945, uh, that's 77 years nearly, there is no reason to be so secretive. And if the government is so jittery about that one person and still keeping secret files on him, then there is something wrong. So we wanted to disentangle all these strands and bring the full and the true picture in front of our countrymen. That is how this led to writing this biography. In 2019, we had written a book called Conundrum. Anuj and I had co-authored. It dealt entirely with the disappearance mystery and the final phase of Netaji's life, Subhash Chandra Bose's life. And now this book focuses exclusively on his work and life and vision, ideas, and uncovers many unexplored areas.
You have chosen a title, the an inconvenient nationalist. Now, so inconvenient is also a very a term which can question. Like, it's a very attractive word, actually, a really attractive you have written, but it's a very, like, it already puts people out of convenience. And the second thing your word to use is nationalist. Now, being an author myself, I can focus on words. Now, nationalism is bad, patriotism is good. That's a new narrative right now.
Correct.
And probably terms it comes from the American struggle to overcome the nation states, the first nation states, which were Native Americans. And therefore, there's a revivalist movement in Europe going on and in other parts of the world where they want to go back to the pre-Christian cultures. Those are called the nations, and that's why nationalism is bad. So most of the leftist media, which is supposed to be anti-colonialism, is actually pro-colonialism throughout the world, not just anywhere else, is throughout the world. So actually the traditional left or the ultra left is actually the right, real right. And what they classify as the real right is actually the center in every part of the world, whether it's a USA or Europe or India or Africa. By the way, India usually copies the American trends, and it uses the American language, American words. They may not understand. They don't understand what is liberal, what is conservatism according to the US. They don't understand. So why you chose this word nationalist?
Well, you described it very aptly and very nicely. And again, I'm in completely agreement with what you said. And the predominance of the American terminologies and ways of American analysis, thought, methodologies, because a whole generation or a couple of few generations have studied in the US universities, which is a very good thing. And they have come back to India with their ways of understanding the world, their worldview, and they have borrowed the language as well. So I think it is ascribed to Edmund Burke, the famous saying that I'm ready to debate with you, provided you define the terms which are going to be debated, clearly defined. So nationalism is a term that needs to be defined before I debate it, and it also depends on who is defining. As you said, that nationalism is a bad thing. That has come to pass. It is now a bad thing. Patriotism is good, nationalism is bad. And Subhash Bose very nicely addressed this issue in 1928 when he spoke to the Youth Congress Conference in Bombay, in Pune, sorry, I beg your pardon, in Pune in 1928. And he clearly stated that Indian nationalism is not narrow. Indian nationalism signifies Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram. Satyam, truth. Shivam, what is good and benevolent, good for everybody, for the whole world. and Sundaram, and it's beautiful. So Indian nationalism is equivalent to Satyam Shivam Sundaram. That is what Indian nationalism stands for. And there is no nationalist in India if Subhash Bose is not a nationalist. He was the the biggest symbol, the most perfect symbol, if I may say so, of nationalist thought. For him, of course, he lived in a period where there were left and right. These terminologies mattered a lot. He was politically, economically, he was a socialist and on the left, and he left no doubt about that. But he was at the heart a staunch nationalist, because for him, whatever mattered was national interest, India's interest. And something that I like to point out, and I posted it a few days ago also, something that he said in 1939 was taken up by Mr. Modi during his campaign in 2013. And in 1939, Subhash Bose said that India must first of all think of her own interest. And that was paraphrased by Mr. Modi in 2013-14 campaign, the India first. And that paid its dividends. Indians understood that thing very late. When Subhash Bose said, not many people understood it, but people now understand what India first means. So that way, he is the biggest representative of nationalist thought in Indian politics. And why inconvenient? Inconvenient because of his uncompromising and radical form of politics, he became inconvenient to the biggest political party of that time, the Indian National Congress, especially the Gandhian leadership. He became extremely inconvenient to them. They did not know what to do with him. So they kind of expelled him from the Congress. Even then, they could not ignore him because he was growing too big, too fast. So something had to be done. And of course, the British Empire considered him enemy number one. So he was, on the one hand, he was an inconvenience to the British Empire, the British Raj. He was an inconvenience to the Congress leadership, who was apparently contesting the British Raj. He was inconvenient to communal forces like the Muslim League. And he was inconvenient to the extreme left forces, who were at that time underground, but were using the platforms of other political parties like the Communist Party of India. And he was also, until 1942, he was also very inconvenient to the mild leftist forces, moderate leftist forces like the Congress Socialist Party. So with his sole focus on India's national interest and India's independence, he was so uncompromising that it became inconvenient to most of the stakeholders at that time, who were looking for different ways, different paths, were at certain points ready to give up certain of the principles, which practically all of them did in 1947, while accepting partition and the hurried transfer of power. And Subhash was practically the lone figure fighting against all of them. That's what made him inconvenient. And that inconvenience was so deeply imprinted in their minds. I am challenging a lot of people here, a lot of establishments here, and a lot of criticism is going to come at me, but I'm ready to prove my points. I have all the evidence. And as I said, that the inconvenience that he caused for all these stakeholders, all these parties and so many leaders, was so deeply rooted in their mind, their annoyance and their irritation, that his legacy was forcefully suppressed for many, many decades after independence. He was never allowed to come to the forefront. His ideas were never allowed to bloom the way they should have. And they never received the required deliberation, the required debate, the required discussion that they deserved. That's why I have called him the inconvenient nationalist.
So one of the hallmarks of a leader is that he wants to bring out truth and his original viewpoint. And throughout the world, if you look at the history of colonization, everywhere in part of the world, India is the only country which stood against militarily. The first opposition to colonial rule was to Dutch by Marthanda Varma in Kerala. Very few people speak about it. That was the first time European colonial power was defeated in a straight naval fight, face to face. And after that, they started working through the Mughal dynasty in Calcutta, where Jahangir was using Kolkata for exports, and it became the largest trading point because the West was still controlled by the Marathas to that extent during that time. So Europeans did not want to go on the west coast of India; they want to focus on the east coast. Now, so where does the mindset of Subhash Chandra Bose came to fight militarily? Like, what was your research on that?
Uh, Militarily, actually, Subhas Bose belonged to a family which went back into the Sultanate period and the Mughal Empire period, and I mean, elite, not just in the common degenerate sense, elite in the sense that they were people of power. They held military authority in the region. That's one. That's the family lineage. The other thing is that the true renaissance that happened in Bengal in the 19th century and the repercussion that we saw in the anti-partition movement in 1905 and the build up to the 1905 movement, where when we see that the Anushilan Samiti was created, where Tilak Maharaj is coming to celebrate Ganesh festival in Bengal, Shivaji festival in Bengal, where we see Aurobindo setting up the Jugantar. So Jugantar later developing into a full-scale revolutionary group. That brief period of 5 to 10 years, that generated so much a revolution in the mindset of the Bengal region. The revolutionary forces that emerged from there was so powerful and so had such an impact on the thinking of the people, the broad mindset of the people, on the governing classes, that the spirit, the thinking was there, suspended across the air, and the young people, the youth were imbibing that spirit. They were learning. There were icons at the time in front of their eyes. There was Aurobindo Ghosh, there was Barinder Ghosh. Later on, there were several people whose name are not so famous right now. And later on, then we hear of Bagha Jatin. Then before that, or around the same time, we had Raj Bihari Bose. So Jatindranath Mukherjee, Raj Bihari Bose, Manavendranath Roy. We have people like Jadu Gopal Mukherjee. We have people like Trailokanath Chakraborty. So people like these are not really well known outside India or even in India nowadays. But at that time, those were heady times, and the spirit of revolution was in the air, and the revolutionary societies were holding strong. They were suppressed, they were oppressed, they were being tortured, they were indiscriminately arrested and thrown to jail, they were being sent to the Andamans, but they held on. And then the emergence of a leader like Chittaranjan Das, who could bring together under an umbrella variant strands of thought, the revolutionaries, the constitutionalists, and organize them. This process, Subhas experienced, witnessed, he went through this process while he was growing up, and it impacted his thoughts very much. He absorbed, he assimilated this thought so much that from the very beginning, he accepted, when he joined the Congress, he accepted the creed of non-violence as a matter of strategy only. He never subscribed to it wholeheartedly. And he was always for a large-scale military action, large-scale armed upsurge. And although he was supportive of the revolutionary societies, what we see is that he was discouraging their independent or sporadic political violence, because he was trying to tell them that, look, these acts of violence, sporadic acts of violence, will only invite more and more repression on you. And what we need is to organize all this, bring them together, train. So throughout the early career, the first 10-15 years of his political careers, you will see that he devotes an abnormal amount of time to organizing volunteer forces, volunteer corps. So he focuses on training, and that worried the British government like hell. They were keeping a keen watch on him, his activities. So he imbibed the spirit from his family lineage, from the age where he grew up under this inspiration of people like Khudiram Bose, martyrs like Khudiram Bose, Prafulla Chaki, Aurobindo, and the whole Jugantar group. And he saw Jatindranath Mukherjee himself. So these are people who, in front of his eyes, they were there and inspired him. He studied. He studied the history of the world. He was a very very meticulous student, and was a very I mean, a student who studied very methodologically, imbibed the knowledge of the world. It might interest you to know that, I mean, at the age of 18, he was writing to a friend of his that what sort of ideal man he would like to be. He would like to be a product of the past, a product of the present, and a prophet of the future. So he was very clear that India's legacy, he had to be rooted in the legacy of the country. He had to know and be completely updated and aware of what was going on around him. He must be completely up to date about it. And combining these two, he should turn himself into somebody who can uh, have a considered view of the future, fairly accurate and considered view of the future. So that was the kind of thought we find from an 18-year-old lad uh, who is trying to shape his life in the spirit of sacrifice for the motherland. Because right from the age of 10, 11, we find that idea ingrained in him that his life had a mission. His life had a mission, and that was to sacrifice himself for the cause of the motherland. So all these factors played a role in shaping the personality that he came to be.
So, I was seeing some interviews. Again, 2 years back there was a big debate in the TV. I think last year also, 2021 also. Subhash Chandra Bose is alive in discussions more than any other leader. Mahatma Gandhi is also alive in a globally, but in a little negative way to Indians. But Subhash Chandra Bose is all positive feelings of everyone. But when their family came on the show, they completely accepted. I was seeing the comments of the daughter of Subhash Chandra Bose in Germany. She accepted the 45 crash theory, and the other family members also on some very popular TV channel, Republic TV in India. And Anuj was there on the show that day, and they were cross questioning. And what I understood was the family believes in the official propaganda or the information given to them. Are they compromised according to you? Because you are doing more research on his life. Generally, independent people find out more truth about a family sometimes also, a third party view. What is your view?
Well, I don't have to give my views on that, because a large section of the family themselves have accused each other of being at the in the pay of the Congress, subsequent the Congress governments, which ruled at the center. So there have been prominent newspaper articles. People in the family have come out and spoken on TV channels about it. And as far as Netaji's daughter Anita is concerned, she has grown up under under the influence of a section of the family who have always subscribed to the official Congress theory, and they have, their existence and their work have been dependent on the grants given by the center at a very large scale. So that's one reason why she tends to believe in the air crash theory. But it is not important what Anita thinks, because Anita was barely a few weeks old when Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, when Netaji left Europe for Japan. What is more important is the views of a mother who knew much more of Subhash Bose and who had seen more of the world and had a better comprehension of what was going on around her. And her mother, which Emilia Schenkel, never subscribed to the plane crash theory till the end of her life, to the very end of her life. There were great efforts made by the successive Congress governments to turn her around, to get her approval to bring the so-called ashes from Japan to India, the ashes of so-called ashes of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose from Japan to India. But Emilia Schenkel never agreed to that. There were pressure exerted on her. And even it happened that, and this story also comes from within family members, that one foreign minister went to meet her in Germany, and he was practically shown the door by her when he proposed that the ashes should be brought back to India. So there are various groups within the family, and they have kept saying different things. And the large section of the family never subscribed to the story of Netaji's death in the plane crash. And till the 1960s and later, 1970, early 1970s, people like Netaji's elder brother, a couple of Netaji's nephews, gave public statements and made statements under oath in front of commissions of inquiry that they knew that Netaji was alive till that time. So it's not that Netaji's family has spoken in one voice. They have not. But unfortunately, what happened is once we came out with a book, Conundrum, and based on that, based on our research, a national award-winning movie director, Sujit Mukherjee, made a movie called Gumnami. Something bothered them a lot, and all these people who had till then opposed the story of the death in plane crash, they started converging and started talking in favor of the plane crash. Something went on, something hit them, something terrified them, and overnight they changed their views. So all those people who used to come on TV day and night, all those people who used to, members of the family I'm talking about, who used to speak to the press, and I can show you hundreds and hundreds of their quotes in the print media, in bites in the electronic media, where they have debunked the plane crash theory and have refused to believe that Netaji died in the plane crash. Overnight, they changed their stance, and they started talking in favor of the plane crash. I mean, something we don't want to speculate what unnerved them so much that they had to overnight change their views. The same people we found who had stood in support of the commission of inquiry headed by a former Supreme Court judge, Justice Manoj Kumar Mukherjee, who worked from 1999 to 2005, and he submitted his finding to the UPA government that there was no plane crash. So the question of Netaji's death in a plane crash did not even arise. So the family, a large part of the family, came out on the streets. They petitioned the government to accept the report, the findings. The same set of people we found in 2019 completely turned around and saying that the report of Justice Mukherjee Commission was rubbish and it had no value. So it's almost as if they admitted that from 2006 till 2019, for those 13, 14 years, they read the report, they supported the report, but misunderstood the report because probably they did not understand English. So they never explained why this fast. They started taking out, here they started hair splitting, nitpicking, and frivolous excuses. But something snapped inside the family due to our findings on Netaji's fate, and they turned. So what it is, time will probably tell.
So, in your book, did you capture what is the actual fear of the Congress party against the truth of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose?
Absolutely, it is not only the Congress party, but it's the fear of the establishment, the government establishment. Because, as you said, I mean, mythology is so important. So the entire story of India's independence is standing on that mythology. So what is the mythology? The mythology is that De di hame azadi bina khadak bina dal. So Gandhiji led the Satyagraha movement. People, crores of people sat peacefully, and the British got unnerved. They said, okay, we are your friends because you are asking us to leave so peacefully. We are leaving, India is yours. So that is the myth. So they left in a very friendly way. Gandhiji gave them an honorable exit, and the entire thing, feel good narrative, which is nothing but mythology, has been created from the very beginning, from the time of the transfer of power in 1947. So the first thing we keep reminding people is that what happened in 1947 was really not independence, it was transfer of power, because India remained a dominion. India got dominion status. So all those people who, kept screaming for the years the decades preceding 1947, saying that we don't want in dominion status for India. We want complete freedom, complete independence. Something happened for which they just jumped at the offer of dominion status and for grabbing power. And the entire sequence was suppressed. How the transfer of power came to happen, why it happened in 1947 August, and how the triggers were pressed, how the dynamics changed, all those things were suppressed. So this mythology was created about the feel good, because I mean, we have this thing about showing ourselves as good people in front of the Western world. Our elite section, people who are in the bureaucracy, higher echelons of the bureaucracy, and many of whom have continued in kind of a hereditary manner in the top levels of bureaucracy. Their dream is to go and settle abroad in European or American places, get good jobs there, have connections with the international organizations, and be in the good books. I mean, that's the status symbol. So you are an international personality. You get covered by international news media. You get your quotes there. You can travel. You are shuttling between New Delhi and New York and Washington and say London, and that's kind of a status symbol. To do that, this mythology came to a great help. I mean, it became a great help of this friendliness, this fellow feeling, this feeling of love and compassion, out of which independence was handed over to India. It papered over the entire bloody, violent history that actually compelled the British to leave India. Because, I mean, what people, I mean, I will come to that question later, how it happened. But people in position of power are afraid that once the truth about Subhash Chandra Bose, the full truth about Subhash Chandra Bose is spoken, this entire house of cards will tumble in seconds. And the reaction, the popular reaction, will be so fierce that it will be difficult to handle. So in this connection, I would let me tell you a story which we faced in 2007 when we were running our transparency campaign for declassification of documents, official documents. So in our case was one of the first ones where the Central Information Commission, the apex body for transparency mechanism in India, it's a constitutional body. It had only the second full bench hearing on our case, where we had asked for certain documents related to investigations into Netaji's disappearance. So once, I mean, there was every effort made on behalf of the government to wish away what we were asking for, to kind of look down, patronize, and kind of label us conspiracy theorists. But when those things did not work and the matter came to the highest level of the Information Commission, the Home Secretary, the second most powerful bureaucrat in the country, wrote a secret letter to the Information Commissioner saying that if secret files on Netaji are declassified, if they are made public today, there will be widespread disturbance throughout the country and especially violent reaction in West Bengal. Can you imagine the import of that letter, what was written in that letter? This letter was being written in 2007, 60 years after the disappearance, so-called disappearance or death of Netaji. And the second most powerful bureaucrat in the country is writing to a constitutional body, another constitutional body, saying that for a man who has apparently died 60 years ago, there will be rioting throughout the country. Is it even believable? But we can't take it as a frivolous statement, because coming from such a high-level bureaucrat, it has to be a very considered opinion. He couldn't, the Home Secretary of the country cannot write a letter which is thoughtless or frivolous. So there must have been some reason, must have been some ground for his thinking. So that's the reason, that's the day we understood that the story of Subhash Chandra Bose is not just history. It has very strong connections to the present day politics, to the present day political atmosphere in which we are living and breathing. That's One reason why, I mean, once the story is brought out, this whole Gandhian superstructure, this feel-good superstructure, this mythology of truth, nonviolence, and love, world citizenship that has been created will crumble, and that is what probably every government fears, and that's what stops them uh, from divulging the truth. And Congress party, of course, has an added thing because the entire story of Congress is against campaigning against Subhash. So that's what stops them.
See, one of the things which very well put it. One of the things which put is that people want to know, or it's my personal curiosity also, that the fear, there is nothing to hide from the people of India. If you think of a nation, and after you got the independence, that there is nothing to hide. It's actually Subhash Chandra Bose is still the leader of India. Like, people have more respect for him than Jawaharlal Nehru or Mahatma Gandhi, even today. And the Indian National Army, INA, which was being set up with Japanese help, with German help, a lot of help they had got received, even Soviet to some extent. They had a very clear vision and a pulse on the masses. And I think what I heard was various reports that the British were very scared of losing militarily against the uprising within the British Indian Army, which British Indian Army made them successful in World War II as well as World War One. So the entire notion of British giving, and I think that there was an interview of Mountbatten or Attlee, I do not know. I think the Attlee, and when he was asked the question, what was Mahatma Gandhi's contribution to India's independence? He said negligible thrice in the interview. It's a recorded one. It's on YouTube also. Now, these are the facts we all know. People already know. So there is no point
But
in.
this thing happened, which actually, I just interrupt you for a second, which
Uh,
actually had come to India in 1956, and he had met the then acting governor of West Bengal, who was the first Chief Justice of Calcutta, Indian Chief Justice of Calcutta High Court. And so when the governor asked him that what were the main factors for the exit of the British Raj, and he actually had no hesitation in admitting that it was the pressure, the impact of the INA and the trial of the INA soldiers. And when Justice Chakravarti, BP Chakravarti, he asked specifically that what was then Mahatma Gandhi's role, actually smiled and just said haltingly, smiled and haltingly he said, minimal, minimal. So that's and that Justice Chakrabarti himself recorded in a letter he wrote to the historian Ramesh Chandra Majumdar, Dr. R.C. Majumdar, and Dr. R.C. Majumdar published that letter in his memoirs. So we have produced that letter in our previous book in Conundrum, and that's an impeccable evidence. That's the and the thing is that many people used to challenge earlier when these letters were not available, that it's just a figment of imagination, it's fiction. Some people, anti-Congress and anti-Nehru people have invented this story, anti-Gandhi people have invented this story. But this is now, we have the letter, and actually went on to say the same thing to two more historians in UK. Indian historians and Indian scholars in UK. So they also recorded the same thing without knowing that he had already spoken with the governor of Bengal at another period of time. So we have different sources, unrelated sources confirming the same story. So that's the story about Attlee. Sorry, I cut you when you were speaking.
No, I like the passion that you have, because you wrote the book, you have researched it. So I like that. Now coming to the next part, like when we say Subhash Chandra Bose, maybe we'll have to do this discussion in two sessions. Subhash Chandra Bose actually won the independence of India, and his death was was a conspiracy. And I mean, he did not die during 1945. And many research documents are there. The DNA tests were not done of the remains in the Taiwanese temple, and those things are not available to us. And or they were given, but they were not proven I mean, I was also came to know that those bones and things were of somebody else, because he was tall person, Subhash Chandra Bose. So when you look at the controversy over there, and so what is your view on till how long did he live, and who was the person, if you have established that in your book?
Well, there are two ways of establishing this. One is to go into the ashes, do a DNA test, and then establish whether those ashes belong to Netaji or not. And the other thing is to find out if some other person rumored to be Netaji was actually Netaji. So we did both. We took both approach. I mean, we of course cannot do the forensic test on the ashes. They are the property of the government of India. And if the government of India wants, there's DNA tests or whatever forensic tests can be conducted, whatever is feasible on ashes, which have been, I mean, it was cremated in 1945, apparently, whatever the story goes. If whatever tests are possible, they can conduct it in a matter of a week or so. So it is a matter of wonder why they have not done till now, or maybe it's a possibility that they have already done it and they know that they are not Netaji's ashes at all. So we cannot go take the forensic route in that question, but what we can do is to assess and analyze the evidence in that. And there we have conclusively shown that the entire story which was built up by the Congress government regarding Netaji's death in the plane crash in 1945 is nothing but a hoax. And the Congress government knew it very well. So in doing that, we looked into the question of identity of this one person who lived in Uttar Pradesh from the early 1950s till 1985. And he was, after his death, he was given the name of Gumnami Baba, which is the name itself is a very repulsive one to many Indians and especially Bengalis. Gumnami Baba sounds a very kind of odd name to be given to a person of a stature of Subhash Chandra Bose. But Gumnami Baba is a name that stuck because of the media usage, and we have used we are compelled to use that name. But his followers, this man's followers, used to call him Bhagwanji, Bhagwan. They used to call him Bhagwanji. So we prefer using the term Bhagwan and Bhagwanji the way he was called, because he was a saintly figure. He had taken sannyas and lived the life of a recluse, hermit, and proper sannyasi. He clearly said that I have followed all the rules of sannyas and I lived the life of a sannyasi. So he was a sannyasi and he was addressed as Bhagwanji by all his followers. We also prefer that term over Gumnami Baba. Gumnami Baba doesn't have a good, nice ring to it. It has a very conspiratorial ring to the name, but we are helpless. We have to use it. So what we try to do is we try to find out the identity of this man. Now, the thing is that if we can prove that this man was Subhash Chandra Bose and living well into 1985, then by all logical means, the story of the plane crash is false. Because it cannot happen, both cannot happen at the same time. Subhash Chandra Bose could not have died in 1945 and lived till 1985. So that's not possible. So if this man was Subhash Chandra Bose, so we wanted to find out. As it happened, the question of the identity of this man had come up before the Inquiry Commission, which I mentioned just some time ago, the Justice Mukherjee Commission of Inquiry, which functioned from 1999 to 2006. And Justice Mukherjee, he investigated all the possible angles. He interrogated the witness accounts. He examined documentary evidence, and he found there were many letters from erstwhile revolutionaries who were very close to Subhash Chandra Bose, have spent many years with him, and there was no question of them mistaking anybody else as Subhash Chandra Bose. Even Subhash Bose's family members can mistake. If they meet him, they can make a mistake. But these were people who were so deeply working with Subhash, so closely working with Subhash, that there was no question of they are making any mistake. So many such people were regularly over the decades in touch with this person, Gumnami Baba or Bhagwanji. And so they were credible witnesses. So their witness accounts were there, their letters were there. There are a lot of other people wrote letters and diaries, took notes. Those were there. And this man himself used to write many, many letters to people who used to come to him. These letters, most of them were carried by couriers. I mean, individual personal couriers, they were carried by hand. Very few among them were posted. Not many letters were sent through post. And so these were done, all these were examined, and the circumstantial evidence, Justice Mukherjee found, was very, very strong. And there was no doubt, no reason to doubt the witness accounts of the revolutionaries and the people who had seen them. He was on the verge of concluding there, but the problem was created by the forensic evidence. In the room where this person used to live, a set of 9 teeth were found, 7 teeth were found. A set of 7 teeth were found, and these teeth were sent for DNA examination to see the match with Subhash Bose's family. So now, if there was a match, then obviously this man was Subhash Bose. And if there was no match, obviously this man was not Subhash Bose. Because DNA will not lie. DNA results will not tell you lies. It is the final standard of finding out the truth. So it was sent to one laboratory in Hyderabad, the CDFT, and they examined, they took out the pulp from the 2 teeth and tested for DNA. They didn't find adequate material, and they said, our results are inconclusive. We cannot reach a final result. So they sent back the samples to the commission. Now, what the commission did, the commission sent these samples to the Central Forensic Science Laboratory under the Government of India, and that CFSL lab in Calcutta. Now, in Calcutta, they examined these set of teeth and compared with the DNA of Netaji's family on both the maternal and the paternal side. And then they informed the commission that the DNA doesn't match. So obviously, if the DNA doesn't match, then this man cannot be Subhash Chandra Bose. Now, the commission also got the handwriting of this man examined by one independent expert and by 2 government Sarkari experts. The independent experts did a thorough job. He took nearly 400 blown up pictures of Bengali and English handwriting, letter formation and everything, and submitted a voluminous report close to 1,000 pages to the commission, showing Dr. Bilal, he said that I am putting at stake my entire reputation as a forensic expert, and I am telling you categorically that the handwriting of this man and the handwriting of Subhash Bose, they have the same origin. In other words, they are the same persons. So that was his conclusion. But what happened with the Sarkari handwriting reports? The Sarkari experts said the handwritings don't match. Now, the case was sealed. And this Justice Mukherjee, although he had a very strong circumstantial evidence, he was forced to conclude that they are not the same person. So the matter was closed. But he didn't give a categorical opinion. He said this matter need not, because he didn't have clinching evidence. He said there is no clinching evidence to prove that this man was Subhash Chandra Bose, so I don't need to get into any further detail about it. He stopped there. Now, this thing came up again in the Allahabad High Court. The Allahabad High Court looked at the way Justice Mukherjee treated the evidence and was very unhappy with it. The Allahabad High Court said that this is not the way to treat evidence, because even if there is the slightest doubt in the evidence regarding a man of the stature of Subhash Chandra Bose, the thing needs to be examined into far greater depth, and there needs to be further inquiries. So the Allahabad High Court asked the Uttar Pradesh government to set up a commission of inquiry. Uttar Pradesh government didn't bother; they were not at all interested. But due to our lobbying, Mission Netaji's lobbying, finally Akhilesh Yadav, who was the chief minister then, set up the commission in 2000, announced the commission in 2016. It started operation in 2017 and all. So from the very beginning, it became clear to us that this is just a farcical commission and it's not going to achieve anything. At that point of time, we decided to take matters into our hands. So what we did, we collected handwriting samples of Gumnami Baba, Bhagwanji, and handwriting samples of Subhash Chandra Bose. And we sent them to one of the top experts in the US. His name is Kurt Baggett. and he has done. He follows the FBI methodology, and he has worked in association with the FBI in certain projects also. He's one of the top experts there and has a huge experience. So we sent, with the help of two of our friends in the US, we sent the handwriting samples to him, and didn't tell him anything. We did not give him any background. He had, as it is, as an American forensic expert, had no idea about Indian politics or Indian history. But even then, we took the precaution. We never took the name of Subhash Chandra Bose. We never took the name of Gumnami Baba, so that there is no point of, there is no scope of cross reference, no scope of him guessing or finding out which personality we are talking about. We just sent him the samples, gave some basic background information, that's some basic context, so that he can judge the handwriting samples. That's all. And no detail, we gave no detail, no information which could even remotely suggest that we were talking of Subhash Chandra Bose. So he examined in detail, again, like the Indian independent expert, Kurt Baggett examined the handwriting samples in detail, in great detail, and did a meticulous job. And he had no idea who we were talking about. Within a few weeks, he gave us his report and told us that there is an absolute match. There is no doubt that the two persons are same. And he said most remarkably that I am ready to travel to India and defend my finding in a court of law. That is most remarkable. He came on television on our invitation and he spoke. He explained how he did his analysis and examination and how he reached the conclusion. All that is there in the YouTube, available in the YouTube. And so that was the first confirmation that we got. Then we looked into into reconfirming his findings. So Kurt's finding was our basic pillar. We wanted to reconfirm. So we follow the same methodology, same process, and now this time hired an Indian expert, one of the topmost Indian experts, independent experts. So we gave him the same material we had given Kurt. He did another meticulous job and drew charts, huge charts, and compared the letters and all. And without knowing anything, he also came to the same conclusion. So then we tried to find out then why, if independent experts world over, experts of repute are saying that they were the same person, why did the government labs give different findings? Then we looked into the government reports and found that one report on the handwriting examination from the Calcutta lab was just a one-page report compared to hundreds, 400 images and hundreds and thousands of pages of reports from other experts. This was just a one-page report saying that handwriting doesn't match. That's it. The second government report, some frivolous comparisons of some casual, very casual comparison of some letters. And to the naked eye, when I looked at the comparison chart that was given by the second government lab, they looked more similar than different. And yet the government experts said that they don't match. So we have more independent experts across the world talking in favor of the two persons being the same. And whereas two government labs saying that they don't match. Now we know what happens in India. We have Supreme Court and High Court rulings on how the forensic labs, government-controlled forensic labs operate. And there is enough scope for questioning their not only efficacy, but also integrity. So I'm not going to that question, but this is where we stood in terms of the handwriting. But still the stumbling block was the DNA test result. Everything is fine. I mean, even if the handwritings match and everything is good, DNA is not matching. So what do we do? If we cannot do a DNA examination, we cannot do a DNA test on our own. And those samples probably were destroyed and there is no scope of doing a DNA analysis. So what we did is we wanted to re-examine the DNA findings of the government labs. So we shared, now when DNA happens, when DNA tests are done, there is something called, in the process of examinations, a report is generated, which is called an electropherogram. Now, electropherogram is something like when you go for an examination to the physician, he will ask you to do an MRI or an X-ray or just any plain simple blood test. So those MRI reports, the X-ray reports, or the blood test parameters, the readings, the doctors base their interpretation, their diagnosis on those readings, on those basic numbers. That is what electropherogram is analogous to. So the DNA test machines, when the DNA samples are put into the machine reads the DNA sequences. And then the experts interpret the readings. They look at the peaks, the troughs, they look at the graphical patterns which the electropherogram gives them, and then they arrive at a conclusion. So when we sent the CDFD results, which the lab claimed were inconclusive to experts in the US, in New Zealand, and also in India. In BHU, there is a top level expert of DNA, a genetic expert. And they all looked at the report and they said that this, well, technically speaking, the results are inconclusive, but there is more similarity than dissimilarity. I mean, it could, as they might as well have called this a match. So we were stunned to hear that coming from different sources, unrelated sources, telling us that what one government lab in India had said, termed as inconclusive, actually there was a large amount of match in the DNA samples. Now, we had to move on to the second sample of DNA, the second findings of the DNA test results, which was done by the CFSL Kolkata. Here, the first thing we noticed is that even before the samples were opened and the tests were done, there was a news in the local media, in the largest newspaper in Calcutta, who reported that the samples have not matched, that the DNA samples don't match. So we kept scratching our head. I mean, how can a newspaper report a finding even before the tests have begun? So we looked into the proceedings of the Mukherjee Commission, and we found that the Mukherjee Commission had taken the newspaper to the Press Council of India, complained against the newspaper, and the newspaper had defended its reporting, saying that this is called a scoop. Unfortunately, the Mukherjee Commission did not take the case to the logical conclusion. They left it there. But then we found that at the Press Council, the newspaper had defended its reporting. They called it a scoop. So here we find that newspaper is defending something, a report, which they call scoop. But scoops happen once an event already occurs. Scoop is something that an event has occurred, it is secret, but a reporter, an enterprising reporter, brings out the news and makes it public. That is a scoop. How can a reporter, on what count can he report something that has not yet happened? I mean, either he has to be on a time machine, he has to have a time machine in his possession, or he has to have some supernatural facility, supernatural faculty to read into the future. The third conclusion is obvious, that there was something very, very wrong. Now, how do we establish? So what we did is, to get the second opinion on the electropherogram, we asked the CFSL to give a copy of the electropherogram. And although, I mean, this is a question of transparency, although the CDFD had given their electropherograms copy to the commission, the CFSL did not. But it is the protocol around the world in all forensic examinations which are under judicial scrutiny to submit the electropherogram. But the CFSL claimed that it is our standard, our policy, we are different, unique in this world. We don't give electropherogram to anybody. So they refused to give the electropherogram to the Mukherjee Commission. And when we asked, they refused to give the electropherogram to us also. And next time one of our friends asked, a few years later, they said that we have lost the electropherogram. And now there was such a hue and cry in the electronic media that they had to take a step back and say, okay, we have found the electropherogram, but still we will not give it to anybody. And why won't they give it to anybody? Under the transparency laws, under the laws of freedom of information, because they claimed that this information belonged to a third party. And without the direct approval of the third party, they cannot give the results. Now, who is the third party here? Third party is Gumnami Baba. And third party is Gumnami Baba, whom the government said, whose identity is not known. They did not know where he lived, and he is dead. So the whole thing was such a frivolous exercise an excuse on part of the government, that it became absolutely clear as daylight. And since then, we have spoken to many other forensic experts, have shared the findings, and they are all in agreement that there is no doubt that the DNA test results were fudged and there was a forensic fraud. So here we have a complete match on the handwriting, and here we have a complete unanimity and agreement amongst international experts that the DNA test results given to the commission were fudged, and actually, in fact, there is some extent of match. So this leaves us in a position where we have no doubt that this man called Gumnami Baba, whose fascinating story we have recorded, is was none other than Subhash Chandra Bose, and he lived till 1985.
What a detailed answer analysis on this. I think my doubts say rested on this one. Uh, the uh, the last question actually, and please give us a link of the book so we can put it on the video as well.
Absolutely, sure.
And the today's generation, we are again going back to discussing like Savarkar in India, and the Western media. A lot of Western people are listening right now who are interested in this history. Now, the Western media consistently talks about Mahatma Gandhi as a hero because Mahatma Gandhi did something for them. And that is the nature of Nobel Peace Prize or any peace prize. When you do something for the church, you get a Nobel Peace Prize, or you work on their strategy, then you get a Nobel Peace Prize. And the Western world everywhere puts Mahatma Gandhi, which is a sign of victory over India, because they avoided bloodshed of their own soldiers. And that's a victory for them. So do you think that can be the reason why the West promotes Mahatma Gandhi more than any?
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at the beginning of the Second World War, when Mahatma Gandhi goes to meet the viceroy, he sits in front of the viceroy and weeps, saying that I cannot even imagine the London, the great structures in London, the Westminster being bombed and being razed to the ground. It's beyond my image. He sits there and weeps in front of. He breaks down, and these are recorded minutes that he breaks down in front of the viceroy. And on the contrary, Subhash Bose is there. He's saying that this is the opportunity. I mean, let's just organize ourselves. Let's stand up and claim what is ours. It's the freedom is ours to take. Independence is ours for the taking. Let's just push the movement. Let's just launch the movement right now and grab the independence. This is India's opportunity. So the entire Congress Gandhian leadership, from Mahatma Gandhi to Pandit Nehru, Sardar Patel, everybody goes against Subhash Bose at that time, and they force him to go outside Congress, to move out of Congress. They virtually expel him from Congress, and as a result, he had to leave the country. So there is a complete divergence of points of view, of perspective at that time. So Subhash is so antagonistic to the British Raj that he was uncompromising, that slavery was not acceptable to him. Whereas to the Gandhian leadership, Mahatma Gandhi and his followers, it was a matter of negotiation, compromise. I mean, yes, okay, we want freedom. We are also happy with dominion status. Okay, but let's talk. We don't want you to be inconvenienced in any way. So they were thinking in terms of global peace. They were probably all the time aiming at a Nobel Peace Prize. It's irony of fate that none of them got any. They were talking of the the non-necessity of armed forces. And even after India became free, there were efforts made by the President of India, who was the commander of the armed forces, to disband the army. I mean, this was unthinkable. This is unthinkable. These are the histories which are not taught to our kids in our generations, and people are not aware of these things. People are not even aware of the basic facts that even after we were apparently independent, free, the head of our armed forces was a Britisher. Till 1955, armed forces, air forces were Britishers. Till the 1960s, the commander of the Navy was a Britisher. Most Indians are not aware of this fact. Most Indians are not aware of this fact that our own intelligence bureau was regularly reporting to MI5 in London. There was an institutional mechanism by which information collected by the IB was regularly sent to the MI5, and one officer of MI5 was stationed in New Delhi to facilitate that in exchange of information. And he had a proper designation. He was called SLO, Special Liaison Officer, Security Liaison Officer. I beg your pardon, Security Liaison Officer, and that arrangement continued till 1968. And it ended only in 1968. And why did 1968 it end in 1968? Because India did not want it anymore? No, it was because the British government said that we don't have the budget to arrange for that office anymore, so we are winding up that office. So that's how it came to an end. Otherwise, probably it would have continued. So all the snooping happened on Netaji's associates till the 1970s. They were also being fed to the British government, and those letters are all there, and everything is for there to see. And the credit, of course, is of Gandhian non-violence, peace, and love. So, I mean, that's the mythology that has been fed to generations of Indians, and now it's time to completely demolish that mythology.
Thank you so much, Chandrachurji, and you stayed so long and clarified all these important things for viewers. Please get this book when it's released. From which platform is coming from? Which publication?
It's being published by Penguin, and it's a very big thing. And so hopefully I will share the link. The pre-order link is already available. So I will share the link with you. And you can, it would be lovely. It would be great if you could share it with your viewers and your associates and through your channel. That would be lovely. I will share it with you.
So thank you so much for coming, and do read this book and let us know your feedback. And most important, do comment on this video, which is important for us.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.